Hey guys, today I wanted to show you how to use variables in Terraform. So this is our main from the last example, just creating a simple Windows VM. Um, Also, we have a couple other files here that are important. We have our variables.tf, which I will explain, and also our terraform.tf vars. So jumping back to main for a second, you'll see in the resource group example, instead of directly telling it what the name is, like using quotes, we're just saying var.rginfo.name. And similarly for location, it's var.rginfo.location. So if we go into variables.tf, there's a couple things I want to show you here. So this is using object notation. So we have a variable called rginfo, which you saw on the main. And then inside of that, we have two subvariables, whatever you want to call it, name and location. And you can see they're defined as strings. Another way to do it is just a more simple variable. So we have resource group name, and this can be anything you want. You come up with that name, but you have to tell it what type it is. And most of the time it's a string. You can also have integers and other options. And the same thing here with the location. So there's pros and cons to each. The object notation is a little more work, but it can be helpful if your project is really complicated, just to know exactly what variable you're talking about, especially when you have a name. If you have 16 objects you need to name, something like that. Further down, we have our VM variables. So this is a change from the last one. We have VM name. Again, you can name that whatever you want, and it is of type string. We have the size of the VM, and here we have something new. So we've added a default, which effectively makes this optional. So we don't actually have to pass a value for this if we don't want to. And if we leave it blank, the VM will be created with standard F2. Also, we have our admin username and admin password for the VM we're creating. So the variables.tf, as you've seen, this is where you declare the variables, how you set it up, and then how you pass the variables is in your tf vars file. So here you can see we have resource group name equals variable test rg. Very similar to how we would do it in main. We're just going through an extra step, going through variables and into the tf vars. It makes it really easy to reuse it because resource group name and especially location, those two get used and reused quite a lot. So it's nice to just define them in one place. And then if you have to make a change, you just change your TFRs and it's reflected in multiple places in your main. Again, going back to RG info, this is the object notation. Very similar setup. It's just inside of the object RG info. And then it has properties, location, and name. And lastly, you can see our VM variables. So VM name, just Windows VM. Size is standard F2. Again, that's optional since we have a default. I could actually comment this out and it would still run just fine. And lastly, we have our admin username and admin password defined. So going back to the main, I just want to show you the different ways you can call variables. So in the resource group, we're just referring to that object notation. So var.rginfo.name. Var is required. It just means you're calling a variable. And let's go down to the Windows VM, and I'll show you the more simple way to use a variable. Again, here in line 37, we just have var.vmname. And again, that's going to pull the information from the TF vars at runtime and execute it, and you'll see that the VM is whatever we put in TF vars. That's the name. Okay, so I've just updated the size there to reflect the var.size. So that will go to variables size, and it'll see the default standard F2. And again, we've commented that out in the TF vars. Other than that, we have var.admin username, var.admin password, again, defined in variables, and the actual value that we want to pass is defined in TF vars. One thing I want to point out here is another way to reuse like your resource group name and location. So since we're creating it here, we can actually just refer to the lines of code above this. So where we create the Azure RM resource group, named example, and then just take the name from that. But you're not always creating a resource group every time, so sometimes you have to use variables. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so you can see we're creating 5 resources. That's everything we defined here: resource group, VNet, subnet, NIC, and the VM itself. So that looks good to me. So we'll go ahead and apply. All right, so we've skipped ahead here. It took about 1 minute and 35 seconds, but it did deploy. So let's go look in the portal and see what that VM looks like. So I'm here in my subscription, looking at my resource groups. I'm going to refresh. There's our variable test RG, and there's our Windows VM. And you can see Windows VM, that's the name that we gave it. And size, you can see standard F2. So it pulled that from the default variable. And the other ones it pulled from the TFRs that we passed it to directly. So yeah, just a quick video showing you guys how variables work in Terraform. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.